Born Whole by Routes Bloodthorn. Vanir I was born whole. Fully formed with his mind full, Vanir I stepped out into the sunlight of the garden's observation deck. Looking around with his wide eyes, he was in a duraglass cylinder, overlooking the 8 long horticultural bays, the duraglass hidden beneath layers of dust. Surrounding the structure Vanir I had been born in was nothing but desert, with strange streamers of light off in the distance, making the horizon look strange to Vanir I's eyes. "Workday will begin in 15 minutes, a soft voice said from the air. "Thank you," Vanir I said. "Debris must be cleared from hydroponics and greenhouse duraglass surfaces," the voice said. Vanir I nodded, knowing how he would have to complete such an action. Not that he had ever been taught. He had been born knowing his tasks and his duties. Vanir I looked at the duraglass. The glass itself had held through the storm, but the supporting structure had warped, allowing the strange energies from the desert beyond to affect the plant life he had spent 4 rotations around the sun maintaining. The air was thicker now. He could feel the warmth through the glass. It pleased him. Sighing, Vanir I checked his knowledge within his mind. There, crossbreeding, strengthening a plant via selection. He could use faster, more reliable methods than crossbreeding, but those methods were methods of last resort. He looked again at the air gap. The servants had gone out rotations ago. He would have to solve this his way. Fungus it is. Vanir I stood outside. The strange, deadly energies had subsided somewhat, but he was not here to measure them. Instead, he knelt down and examined the fungus. It had spread, driving roots into the sand, feeding off the sunshine as well as the deadly energies. It was good. The crack had gotten wider, wide enough that Vanir I could slip his finger into it. The grass seed he'd encouraged through the gap had taken hold, battling the fungus, and had begun to sprout in a fan away from the crack. Vanir I was tired. He had been born whole. He had cared for Plantholm and the plants within. Vanir I laid down on a soft bed of fungus, moss, and basic grass. He sighed and closed his eyes. Vanir II was born whole. He knew all there was to know. He knew his place in the world, knew magic words to change plants, knew that Plantholm was his home. Over the decades, he ensured that the lichens and base grasses expanded from Plantholm, closer to Plantholm, where the sand had been defeated and turned into loam. Vanir II had planted seeds of tough but attractive bushes and plants. Eventually, Vanir II lay down on a bed of moss, where his ancestor Vanir I had lain when his biological functions had ceased. Vanir II was content as he closed his eyes. The next would carry on his work. Vanir III was born whole. He knew the secrets of nature, of plant and water. He knew magic words to modify life. He stood on the deck of Crystal Observation Deck, observing how the green had spread out. Plantholm was old. The duraglass was discolored in places. The metal had gone old and brittle. It was time to use magic to pull water from deep beneath the sand that had become soil. The moss and fungi would strip the poisons out, and those poisons that the lichens and moss did not filter, Vanir III had plans for. Vanir III went outside and began to sing, songs of passion and magic that let him reach down into the rock and bring forth the water. Once they started flowing, he lay down on the soft moss and went to sleep. Vanir XII was born whole. He knew the secrets of nature, of plant and water, of wind and rain, of magic and will. His pointed ears and wide, sensitive eyes were reflected in the small creature in front of him, who was yawning as the petals of the flower peeled back. The tiny creature was female, and it was her job to pollinate flowers. A perfect recreation of Vanir 11, who had used magic to create them. It had been Vanir 12's duty and pleasure to oversee her birth and the birth of her sisters. She yawned, responded to his singing, and flew into his hand. She preened as he moved through the greenhouses of Plantholm. Happy with his success, Vanir 12 went outside the crystal walls of Plantholm and opened his hand, letting her sense the world around her. She was a queen. She had been born whole. She would fly through the air, now sweet to the taste, and no longer choking those who tried to breathe it. Vanir 12 laid down on the moss and closed his eyes. It had taken dozens of decades for his work to be done, and now that it was, he could rest. Vanir 38 had been born whole. He knew secrets, magic, and how to alter life itself. Unlike the others, he knew who he was. He was a wood elf. He knew this because he knew, because he had been born whole. It had rained the day before, without the acids that turned the plants to soup, that soaked into the ground. The acids had been slowly dropping in strength, which meant that Vanir could start singing plants that were more fragile, more gentle. He had been born whole, but his time was nearly done. He sang to the fairies, who sang back and preened. He lay down and slept. Vanir 68 had been born whole. He knew the magic of plants and the secret songs of the Fae. He had traveled far from Plantholm, 4 days of walking. The Fae had danced and sang to him that they had seen something beyond their green lands, where the sickness sand spread out from the good, healthy green. He pushed aside flowers and walked down grass, pleased at how far the green and plants had grown. 4 days' walk. In front of him, he saw another wood elf, the first time he had ever seen another of his kind. "I am Vanir 68, he said. "I am Damtir 95, the other said. "I greet you. Am I the first you have met?" Vanir asked. Damtir nodded. "Shall we exchange secrets, songs, and spells?" Vanir smiled. "Of course." Together they sang, telling one another their secrets. "Shall we merge our gardens?" Damtir asked. "Yes," Vanir answered. Vanir walked back, feeling tired. He laid on the moss, and the fairies sang to him. It had been good. Vanir 129 was born whole. He knew the secrets of plants, the magic of songs, and the dances of the Fae. Plantholm was dying. Spells were failing. Songs no longer answered. He used the last of his magic to bring into being the little ones, covered with fur, covered in scale, covered in hide, flying ones, swimming ones, walking ones. He had cast the last spells, and the magic was dying as Plantholm died. But Vanir 129 was content. The sky was blue. The stars no longer stripped the plants of their life. The sun no longer seared, the water no longer poisoned, and the air no longer choked. As Plantholm died, Vanir 129 smiled. He was a wood elf, keeper of the plants, singer of the songs. His work made the day warm, the nights cool, the air pure, the air sweet, and the land covered in plants. He laid and went to sleep, smiling. Confederate survey vessel, puddle jump, report on Maveline 228. Terraforming complete, environment stable. Wood Elf class terraforming systems have shut down in accordance to projections. Estimated time from beginning to full terraforming? 238.5 Solarian years. Looks like the project was a success. Nothing follows.